All right, so we are live, everyone. My name is Jesse, and I am with Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. For those joining us for the first time, we are all about bringing conservation, adventure, and science into classrooms and homes now around the world. Thank you so much for joining us today as we continue our epic series with the Toronto Zoo. We have done, I think, 9 programs with the zoo now over the last month, everything from polar bears to Komodo dragons, tigers, and more. So we so appreciate you continuing to join us as we highlight the amazing education work that this awesome facility in Toronto does. A few quick housekeeping notes before we dive in. As always, if you're tuning in on YouTube, thank you for joining us, and you can type in questions in the chat bar. You can also join us on the Slido app. So I will link this in the YouTube chat bar as well. But basically, if you go to Slido and use the event code Rhino, you can take part in polls, quizzes, and interactive games as well. But without further ado, we are joined live by Mary Ellen at the Toronto Zoo in the Greater One-Horned Indian Rhinoceros exhibit. So she is going to tell us a little bit today about this amazing creature and about animal relationships. Do rhinos have best friends? How do they communicate with each other? All sorts of neat stuff. Without further ado, thank you so much for joining us today, Mary Ellen, and take us away.
All right. Hi, everyone. So like Jesse said, my name is Mary Ellen. I am one of the programs coordinators here at the Toronto Zoo in our Learning and Engagement Center. And although the Toronto Zoo is currently closed to the public, that does not mean we have stopped caring for the 5,000 animals that call our zoo their home. So we have keepers and staff in every single day taking care of some of our amazing animals, like Vishnu here. He's one of our special guests today. He's going to be coming in behind us, getting his morning snack. So we're going to learn a little bit about Vishnu. He is a greater one-horned rhino, or Indian rhino as they're commonly known as. We have 2 other rhinos here as well, and we're going to see them a little bit later on. To get us started, though, for today, I'm going to bring out our riddle of the day. So we're going to show the riddle. We'll go through it. I'll give you a hint as to what it could be. And then if you are the first person to guess the answer, while I'm chatting today, I will be saying the answer at some point. You can type it into the Slido bar or in the YouTube chat, and Jesse will give you a shout out at the end of the video. So our riddle for today is: we keep the peace to stay alive, working together to survive. We each have a special job to do, each one important for the crew. So I'll give you a couple seconds here. You can take a look at it. There we go. So your hint for this one today, it will not be an individual animal. It's going to be a behavior or an adaptation or a scientific word that we use to describe a grouping or a majority of animals who all do a similar trait or characteristic. So to get us started here, like Jesse was saying, we are going to be learning about animal relationships. So how rhinos interact with each other, but also how animals interact with the different animals around them as well. So rhinos, we have an example with birds coming up for them. So there's 3 main types of animal interactions between animal and animal species. So you see a rhino here. One of their biggest interactions that they have with another animal, or a relationship, I should be saying, is with a type of bird. So basically what happens is rhinos, although they look like they're wearing plates of armor right now, their skin is actually very sensitive, just like you and I at home. If you've ever been bitten by a mosquito or maybe like a black fly or anything like that, you know that that bite hurts and it's itchy for a long time. Rhinos can actually still feel all those bites as well, and they can be irritated by them. So they have a special symbiotic relationship with other birds in the area who will actually come down and pick and eat the little bugs off of them. So this is what we call a mutual relationship, or mutualistic. So both parties are benefiting from this relationship. The rhinos, the birds are picking away all those bugs and insects so they don't get bit anymore or maybe get a disease from them. And the birds are getting a nice, easy meal and also maybe a cool ride if they stay on the rhino as it walks around. There's 2 other main types of relationships. There's one in which both parties where neither of them really benefit nor get harmed. So they're just kind of have an easygoing one, or they doesn't really harm each other. And that's called like a commensalism relationship. So think about it. If you have ever been in a park where you've seen your dog and a burr attaches to your dog, that burr is just traveling on that animal to get to its next location, but it doesn't really harm the animal at all or harm you. It's more just kind of there. It might be a little bit of an annoyance at most. The last kind of relationship is called parasitic, and this is one people are pretty familiar with. If you think about it here in Canada, especially in Ontario right now, it is the beginning of tick season. So ticks are a little tiny bug. They're itty bitty, and they can burrow into your body. They go in animals, they go in people, and they like to live in tall grasses. Problem with ticks, though, is they carry a lot of diseases with them. So when they jump on a host animal, like a human, or maybe your dog at home, or maybe your cat at home, they can actually sometimes give them something called Lyme disease or other tick-borne diseases. So the parasite is winning, the tick, they're getting food, shelter, somewhere to live, but the host is suffering. So those are our three main types of relationships. Now there's lots of different ways that animals can move and relate with each other. So we're going to turn really quickly over here and actually learn a little bit of how rhinos communicate with each other as well. So down here in our Indian rhino house, we actually have some fake poop. And I know that seems kind of weird, but it is something that people are pretty excited about seeing all the time. So a grouping of rhino poop, we call it a midden. And this is actually, think of it like a social network. So you have your friends on Facebook or Instagram, maybe TikTok, Snapchat, all those sites that you use to communicate. That's exactly what rhinos do with their midden pile as well. So these guys, when they drop their midden pile, other rhinos who circulate around it are able to tell things from this pile of poop. So they can figure out how old this rhino is, what their gender or sex is, if they're sexually mature or not, and if they're healthy as well, which is really cool. So they can get a lot of information from here. And that's because the majority of rhinos are actually more of a solitary species. So let's get into that. What's really the difference between social and solitary? Well, there's a scale for both ends of it. You can have animals that are solitary, so they live alone, but they interact with each other for breeding purposes. That's kind of where our rhinos are at. They're solitary. Sometimes mom and baby will hang out together. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. But for the most part, they tend to live alone. When you get into social animals, that's when it gets a little bit more complex with all these different levels of how social an animal can be. For example, if you were with us last week when we were in our Indo-Malaya pavilion looking at our orangutans, we got a question about why our orangutans are actually alone in their exhibit or only out in pairs together. And that's because orangutans as a species are only semi-social. So what they'll do is they'll be off on their own during the daytime, but at night they'll all huddle together in the same tree and sleep together. All the females and offspring will. But during the day, they spread out and live a more solitary lifestyle from each other. There's lots of other levels to this. As you keep going up, there's animals who not just share space, but they'll also share food with one another. And then the most extreme level of this society or this socialness, we can call it eusocial. And what this basically means, if you think about a bee's nest, or maybe if you've seen larvae on the ground, or ants, those are eusocial societies. And what that is every single member of that grouping or colony of animals or individuals has a really specific job to play to help that colony survive. So think of it in terms of bees. There's one queen bee, and she's in charge of laying all the eggs for the new generation. And then you have worker bees. Well, the queen bee can't be a worker bee, and the worker bees can't lay eggs. So each of them have their own unique job that help their colony to survive. All right, we're going to touch a little bit more about what rhinos are specifically in a second, but I want to bring us over here and talk about an even more important topic for rhinos. So something you guys might have noticed is that rhinos have big horns on their heads. So most people, when you think about a rhino as well, most people think of rhinos with two horns. We're going to talk because there are different species of rhinos, and we're going to showcase them all in a second. But these guys here, they're called Indian rhinos or greater one-horned rhinos, meaning they only have that one horn on their head. And unfortunately, in some places around the world, these guys are actually hunted for their horn. And that's because in some cultures and things like that, it's believed that rhino horn is medicinal. So it has a medical or magical property to it. And by eating it, it means you can cure diseases and things. That is not true. We have tested rhino horn before, and it has no special qualities or properties. In fact, you guys actually have rhino horn in your house right now. And I can help you show you what this actually is. If you look down at your hands or look at your hair on your head or on your arms, that's actually the same stuff that rhino horn is made of. It's a protein called keratin, and we have it in our bodies too. So eating rhino horn would be the same thing if you chewed your nails and then ate them afterwards, which is something that's not very pleasant to think about at all. So there's a lot of places around the world that unfortunately rhinos aren't doing so well in. And one of the ways that you guys can actually help in rhino conservation is by being a part of our video here today. You are learning all about rhinos, and by spreading this knowledge, you can help save them in the wild as well. So we'll do a quick turnaround because Vishnu is being quite cute right now, enjoying some morning snacks over there. And you'll get a chance to look at his horn on his head as he's standing up close with us. So something else to note, Vishnu's horn doesn't quite look the same as the one I just had on my diagram there. And that's because they change as they grow up. So Vishnu is a full-grown adult male rhino. And you notice that he kind of has like a little point at the top of his horn. The horns don't actually grow like that. Vishnu will sharpen his horn. So he'll rub his face on objects around him, maybe rocks. We have some posts outside, some trees, things like that, and they will sharpen it into that point. And this horn is very important for them to help them survive. So you might have wondered right now why Vishnu is the only animal in this exhibit. And I kind of mentioned that they are mostly solitary, specifically the males are. So in a lot of animals out there, the males will be separate from the females most of the time, except for when they want to breed. So what Vishnu will do is he will wander around his exhibit searching for those midden piles of a female and see if that female is ready to be sexually active and have an offspring with him in the future. So he'll spend the majority of his day wandering around trying to find a mate when they're in season, and the rest of the time he'll spend defending his territory. The males don't like to come in contact with each other, so they have a pretty bad relationship with each other. And they will spend time defending their home turf and their base from each other as well. And they can use their size, their intimidation factor, their horns, as well as they do have some pretty sharp teeth. You might be able to see as he's chewing his food there. They have some pretty sharp teeth on the bottom of their mouth that they can use for defense. Now there's something else that's kind of cool about Vishnu right now. As he's eating, you might be able to see his upper lip moving. And this is something that sets Indian rhinos apart from the other species of rhino we here at the Toronto Zoo called a white rhino. And basically to kind of give you a closer up idea of what's happening is imagine if you had a hand attached to your top lip. Kind of weird, I know, but stick with me here for a second. That's basically what he has here. So his upper lip is called prehensile. And it basically means that it's got as much muscle control as like a hand for us does. And this helps him to pick up his food and bring it into his mouth, which is really yummy for him as well. All right, we're gonna keep going here. We're gonna switch over here for 1 second to see a little bit of cuteness in our little cute corner over here. So this is actually two of the rhinos that we have had here in the Toronto Zoo. This big one in the video and this one right here. This is Aca Accreditation. We're gonna see her in a second. She's outside. And this very adorable little rhino here, this is baby Nandu. He is no longer a baby. He's actually grown up so much that he has left our facility here at the Toronto Zoo, and he's moved on in his life to his next location where he can hopefully have his own babies in the future as well. We actually do have a current baby, I'll say right now, named Kieran, who we're gonna meet in a second as well. But something that's really interesting to go along with the animal conservation here is for rhinos, their numbers are depleting right now because of illegal hunting and loss of habitat. But something else that is really difficult for them in the wild is it takes them a long time to reproduce. So on average, a female rhino is pregnant for 16 months. To give you a comparison, an average human is pregnant for about 9 months. So think about how much longer that is for them. And then even once the baby's born, it stays with mom, so it has that relationship with mom for about 2 years, and then it goes off on its own. So it takes a very long time for each individual rhino to be born and then go off into the world, and then they have to become sexually mature adults as well before they can start reproducing. All right, come on with me over here. We're going to take a look at our final map really quickly. This is our map of the world. I mentioned that there are different types of rhinos out there. So these are the 5 different species of rhinos that we currently have in the world today. Here at the Toronto Zoo, we have southern white rhinos and greater one-horned rhinos. So that's who we're just looking at here. Our white rhinos live up in our African savanna. So when you come back to the zoo when we've reopened, you can check them out as well. They live out there, and there's 4 of them right now, which is really cool. So we have a whole family out there as well. Now, I mentioned there's some other species here, and you might be wondering what this list is in front of you. So this is actually called the Species Red List. And this is a globally recognized scale and a way that we track numbers of species in the wild. So we use this for animals and plants. So you can actually Google at home if you want. You can zoom in right here on the logo. If you Google the red list at home, you can look up all sorts of different types of animals out there in the world and plants and see how they're doing on our scale. Now let's dive into this scale really quickly. There's different levels here, and you'll see that the ones that these rhinos fall under are highlighted in red. So that's how you know where that rhino stands on the scale. Down here, we have least concern. So that means an animal or species is doing pretty well. You know, there's still quite a few of them left. Their numbers maybe not going up, but they're not going down either. And as you start to go further right on our scale, it gets worse and worse. So as we continue down, our final endpoint is actually being extinct. Some of you may not know this word, but extinct means that there's no more of that animal or no more of that species left in the world. The one right before it is extinct in the wild, which also a lot of species are at right now, which means they only exist in places like the Toronto Zoo. So facilities around the world that are helping to rehabilitate them or trying to rehabilitate them. And we basically want to stop animals from getting all the way to the right-hand side. And that's what we're trying to help do at the Toronto Zoo here, is keep these animals more to the left-hand side of them. And again, you can help out at home just by learning about all the different things about rhinos here today, about what their horns are actually made of, keratin, just like your hair, and spreading this information, you can actually help with rhino conservation as well. All right, so we're gonna go on a little walk here outside, and we're gonna go see if we can spot our mom and baby rhino. And we'll talk a little bit about their relationship and how they get along with each other as well. So Jesse, I'll throw the audio back to you for a quick second. And we'll keep going out this way.
Fantastic. Well, we'll keep the video on you guys so you can see the scale of this awesome enclosure. And thank you so much for an amazing presentation so far. So we've got a whole bunch of people participating on Slido and on YouTube. Thank you so much. We did have someone get the answer to the riddle right on Slido, but they didn't let me know their name. So I don't know who has it yet. No one's got it on YouTube quite yet. So just keep that in mind, that the riddle is still unanswered by anyone who I could give a shout out to. We've also got a quiz going on Slido that's going to start when we do our Q&A. So thank you guys for getting ready to participate in that. And yeah, over 250 people from Ontario, Minnesota, Pennsylvania, and more. So welcome in, guys. And with that, we're back with our rhinos. Take it away, Mary Ellen.
Oh, and it looks like we've scared Kieran off here. Don't worry, he'll probably be back. All of his food is front and center. So the little baby guy, I hope you guys got a chance to see him there for a second. We'll try and get a better angle of them as we walk down this way. That was Kieran. And I said earlier in the building, baby. And that's because Kieran is starting to become a real adult rhino out there in the world. So he is over a year old now. I think he's actually coming up closer to 2 years or more now. And he is standing there with his mom, Aca Accreditation. Now standing there together, they do look pretty much the same size. Aca, the mom, she is still a little bit bigger, but a way you can tell is her horn is bigger. And that is because when rhinos are born, they weigh about 140 pounds, which is quite large for a baby to be born at. But luckily for their moms, they are born without a horn. And it starts to peek through in their skin at about the 1 year age mark. So Kieran's horn is quite a bit smaller than his mom's horn is. So that's one easy way to tell them apart. Now, we mentioned inside, a mama is pregnant for 16 months and then raises her baby for about 2 years. And during this time, they are going to stay very close together. That was actually a great example when Kieran ran away from us. He ran back and he is now standing behind his mom, Aca Accreditation. And that's because we startled him by coming out here. As I mentioned before, the zoo is closed currently to the public. So these rhinos probably haven't seen anyone except for their keepers in a couple of weeks. And us coming out here as a group, you know, with a camera in their face, it's kind of like the paparazzi coming towards them. They got a little shy for a second. As we stand here, though, they'll get more comfortable with our presence. You can even see Kieran's kind of interested in us again. And that's some of the things that Aca has to teach him. So part of their relationship is she's making sure that he survives to make the next generation of rhinos. That is their whole goal. So she wants to teach him how to find food, what to eat, what not to eat, how to avoid predators. Although they look like such a large animal, they still have to be wary of predators out there in the world around them, especially when they are young. That's when they are most able to be predated. So their moms have to do a really good job of defending and teaching them how to defend themselves as well. Something else to learn is how to get into their wallow. So when you come back here in the summertime at the Toronto Zoo and you're out here at this exhibit and you're like, I can't see a rhino anywhere. What is happening? We're going to turn the camera right. There's another area over here where you can actually see our rhinos, and that's because they're usually in their wallow. So if you head down that pathway instead, you will often see them in a giant mud puddle. And to us, that seems, at least to me, kind of gross. I'm definitely not somebody who enjoys getting that dirty, like covered head to toe in mud, but rhinos absolutely love it. I mentioned inside that they do have very sensitive skin still, and they can feel insect bites. So part of that mud is like a sunscreen or a bug repellent for them. And so they'll spend time in there. It was quite adorable as well when Kieran and Nandu, his older brother, who's no longer here at the Toronto Zoo, when they were younger, they were too small to be in the wallow without going under the water. And so they would sit with their head on their mom's butt as well, which was quite cute. And that would make sure that they could be near her still, hanging out, getting that social bonding that they really need, and still being able to keep cool in all the mud. All right, guys, so we're going to turn it back to Jessie. We're going to answer some of your questions now, and hopefully we'll get our rhinos to come a little bit closer to us as well.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Mary Ellen, for such an awesome presentation. And again, over 250 people joining. So thanks for tuning in at home as we highlight the Toronto Zoo and their amazing rhinos today. So the answer to the riddle, which someone got on Slido, don't know who, no one got it on YouTube yet, was use social. So it was talked about when we were talking about all the amazing different types of social relationships of animals. So good job to our mystery person who got use social. We are going to start the quiz on Slido in just a minute. But I want to start, Mary Ellen, with the most popular question on our chat today, which is from Natalia. What do rhinos eat? What are you feeding them?
Okay, yeah. So rhinos can eat a variety of different things, and there actually is some difference between the type of rhinos. So I mentioned before, there's those 5 different types. We have Sumatran, Javan, black rhinos, white rhinos, and Indian rhinos. And that's because of the shape of their mouth. So I mentioned inside Vishnu and these guys here, they kind of have that hand in the front of their mouth. So that helps them to be more of a browser type animal. So with that kind of extra bit on their lip, they're able to pull leaves off of trees and eat kind of bush and shrubbery that's up a little bit higher. So these guys love things like carrots and vegetables and fruit. In front of us, you can see, I don't know if you actually can see, but they are eating hay right now. So these guys are a herbivore. So they're only eating plant material. So we'll get lots of hay. And then if we pan over to our left, hopefully you guys are able to see it on the ground. It kind of looks like a bunch of shrubbery and leaves, a big pile. That's what Kieran was actually eating when we first arrived. And there's some remnants of carrots, and it looks like sweet potato as well in that pile that I can see from here. And that pile of leaves, that's what we actually call browse. So browse are basically parts of branches and leaves that we feed here to our herbivores. And in Canada, you might notice that the trees in this exhibit don't have any leaves on them, and that's because they all dropped off in the fall time. So what we do here at the Toronto Zoo to make sure that all of our animals have all the nutrition they need all year round, we actually store, pack, and collect our browse in the fall time. We keep them sealed in giant barrels, and then throughout the winter, as we need our supply, we can pull them out so that they still get fresh browse all year round. Oh, and it looks like Aca's coming in for those browse right now. Our white rhinos are the ones who live up in the African savanna. They have more of a lawnmower type mouth, and I mean that very lovingly. They're quite cool animals as well, but they have more of a square line jaw. And so they're mostly grazing. They don't really pick off things off of the trees as much. They're going to just go through and eat all the grass and all the plants growing straight off the ground.
Fantastic. Thanks, Mary Ellen. All right, before we take our second question, I want to give a shout out to Harriet, who nailed our Slido quiz 4 out of 4 in the fastest time. Harriet's been just killing it on Slido and YouTube Live. So way to go, Harriet. All right, we have Genevieve in Oshawa, and she wants to know, are rhinos born with a horn on their head?
Okay, yeah, so right now, Ash is giving us a pretty good look at her horn here. So luckily for their mamas, rhinos are not born with a horn, but that also means that they are susceptible to any danger coming at them because they're only about, they're 140 pounds, which is big for humans. The average human is about 8 pounds at birth. So they're quite large compared to us, but compared to a tiger or a lion who's lurking nearby, they'd be a really nice size. So without that horn, they do have limited defense. But luckily, when they're born, they have their moms right next to them. And Asha's just under 4,000 pounds, and she is a tank. So she is not something that I would want to face off with in the wild. She's got that horn, she's got her sharp teeth, and she's got 4,000 pounds behind her. And believe it or not, rhinos can run faster than you would like to think. They can outrun humans. So I would not want to face off against them. So no, they are not born with horns, but they're very important to their survival and their defense in life.
Very cool. Very rare that we have an animal that tank and vacuum cleaner within 2 questions.
Yeah.
All right, Becky wants to know, how long do rhinos live? So what is their lifespan, in the wild or in captivity, or both?
Yeah, for sure. So like we've said in previous videos, there definitely is a difference for a lot of animals on living in the wild versus in captivity. So especially for rhinos, these guys, like I said, they have a hard time in the wild right now. They're losing a lot of their habitat to urbanization, and they're also being hunted for their horns. So unfortunately, their lifespan in the wild is cut short because of that. If they were left alone though in the wild and they didn't have any of those hunting or issues or anything like that, they can live about 40 years. In captivity, they have access to veterinary care. Like I said, you can see we give them all the proper food and nutrition that they need every day. They can live about another 10 years or so after that.
Wow. So that actually, I want to harp on that for a second, because it's something we've brought up in all our sessions. You know, a lot of people assume that, you know, zoos, maybe animals don't live as long. So can you explain a little bit about accreditation and like an AZA accreditation for the Toronto Zoo?
Yeah, for sure. So we are an accredited facility here, and there's quite a few across Ontario. You can actually look them all up if you do go to the AZA or CAZA sites. You are able to look up which locations around you are accredited facilities. And basically what that means is we are held to a higher standard when it comes for care of our species here. So our plants and our animals at the Toronto Zoo, we make sure that they have the highest grade quality of food, of medical care. Actually, next week, when we do our videos next Thursday, we are going to be looking at our hidden zoo in the Wildlife Health Center and learning a little bit more about how we actually take care of our animals when they do get injured, and some of the extreme lengths that we have gone to make sure that they get the best possible care. And it's not just the animals here, like the giant rhinos. We look after all of our animals, even our fish or our insects. They're getting the same kind of care that animals like Kieran and Aca are getting as well.
Fantastic. I'm super excited for the Hidden Zoo session. So yes, Tuesdays and Thursdays at 11 a.m. Eastern. That's when we do our programs at the Toronto Zoo. So check for those next week, because we're really excited to share them with you. All right. Juliet in Oshawa wanted to know, where is baby Nandu? We watched this amazing, like the world's cutest video. Can you explain what happened, where the baby went?
Yeah, for sure. So this is actually a great time as well for me to mention. I talked about the red list inside, and I've been trying to add in for a lot of our videos as well, where or how our animals meet up with each other to have offspring. That's also a common question we get. And we have something called the SSP, so Species Survival Plan. And basically what this is, I like to think of it as a dating service, or like Tinder for animals. And it's where globally, again, accredited zoos and aquariums will take a look at the genetics of their animals and compare them. So we want to keep the genetics of a species healthy. So basically that means we can't breed two animals together who are too closely related. They might have problems when they're born. So we want to look at animals who are really diverse from each other and have them breed. There is definitely a personable association with it. Sometimes animals don't get along. So there are failed SSPs out there as well. They're not always both swiping right, as you would say in Tinder world. But for our animals here, we match them up. So when Nandu was about 3 years old, he was starting to get to that point where he needed to leave his mom. His mom did not want him around anymore. She was ready to go back into heat, ready to meet back up with Vishnu, our male we met inside. And Nandu was kind of cramping her style. And so she needed him gone. So we did have to separate them at that point. And after that, Nandu, we needed a place for him to go. And so he was being matched up with other female rhinos around the world. And I believe that he went to Safari Niagara. So if you check out there, that's where you can find him now, living his best little rhino life. Hopefully in the future, when he gets a little bit older and he matures a little bit more, he'll be able to have a female companion as well.
Fantastic. Thank you, Mary Ellen, for that awesome story individually, and then about species survival plans. It's a really important message to get across in the zoo programs. All right, a perfect follow-up question to that from the Hood family in Pennsylvania. They want to know, when is the rhino's mating season, if they have one?
So it's actually about right now. So it's kind of in this spring period. We were actually told by our keepers when we came out here today that Vishnu may not be as cooperative for like a photo op because he can smell Aca Accreditation, even though they're in different areas right now. When they're both inside the house or when they're moving between sections, I talked about those midden piles and urine and things like that. He can smell her and she is in heat right now. And so he can go a little bit crazy sometimes, trying to get to her if he, wants to make a move or anything like that. So around this time of the year, for sure.
Fantastic. All right. We have time for about 3 or 4 more questions. These are some great questions today, guys. Thank you so much for being so awesome. Miss Gary wants to know, she's in Woodbury, Minnesota, and she wants to know, these rhinos, they're huge animals. So do you do any training to, help them get in a situation where you can open their mouths or do veterinary checks on them? How do you get them willing and able to do that?
Yeah, definitely. So there's so much training that goes on with all of our animals. That's a really good question that we can touch on here. Very good segue for myself there. We do touch training with them. So we use what's called positive reinforcement training with all of our animals. And basically it's a free choice training. So if the animal chooses to work with us, that's great. They can also get a treat or a reward out of it, some food items. But if they don't feel like working, they don't have to work with us. They work in the entire exhibit. So if the animal wants to come up to the keeper, they can. If they don't, they go off and do their own thing and the keepers will try again later. One of the ways that we train our rhinos here is, you're right, sometimes we need to maybe put them on the scale to weigh our rhinos. Weight is a really important indicator to an animal's health. Often if they're not doing so well, they will drop weight first. And that's one way for us to tell if they're starting to get sick. So we like to weigh our animals as much as possible. Also foot checks for these guys. So we have to take a look at the bottom of their feet and around their feet to make sure that they're doing healthy, maybe a quick nail trim for some of our animals as well. And one of the ways we do that is a touch post. So basically it's a really long stick with a red ball at the end of it. And what the keepers do is they'll put it out somewhere. And when the rhino touches their nose to it, they get a whistle and a treat for a good behavior. And that can be used later on in life if you ever need to turn the rhino around. It's really hard to turn a 4,000-pound animal around. So they will just put the ball somewhere out in front of them and the rhino will line themselves up to touch it. And that way they're in the perfect position. There's also a lot of training. We mentioned that Nandu had to leave and move somewhere else. The question comes up a lot. How do you move a 4,000-pound animal? Well, it is a very large crate, something similar to like a dog or a cat, but on a major scale. And they actually leave that in the exhibit for a couple weeks to months, depending on the animal, and they get fed in there. So they get desensitized to that crate that they're being put into, so that when they go into it on the day of their move, they're not scared or frightened or stressed out. To them, it's a normal training session. And so they are more happy in their crate as well.
Super cool. Again, really detailed answers today. Such a great insight to what goes on at the zoo. Thank you, Mary Ellen. All right, a couple more questions from Hayden, a simple one. How many pounds in food do these rhinos eat? They're huge animals. How much do you need to feed them?
How much do they eat? Oh, that is a really, really good question here. I don't know if I know the exact amount for these guys, but I would say they get at least a couple like flakes of hay a day each. They've had a huge pile of browse here in front of us. They get that probably twice a day. And then they get at least a bucket's worth of like cut up vegetables and fruits and things like that every single day as well. And some of those are used for training purposes, and then some of them as well for enrichment. When we were inside the house with Vishnu, there were some buckets and some random orange things sticking out of them. Those are his carrots. So it's forcing him to kind of go up and pull out his food for an enrichment for them as well.
Perfect. All right. Satara Maimuna, again, thanks to you two for joining us in all our sessions in the last month. So they want to know, do rhinos ever attack people? And I think this is a great question for diving into respect for animals in the wild in general.
Yeah, for sure. So I always like to say my first rule, because we get this question quite a bit about the attack thing, but then also, does this animal bite? My first response always is, if an animal has a mouth, it can bite you. And I say can because there's certain animals who are maybe more inclined to that kind of way of life than others. I mentioned before that rhinos are herbivores, so they're only plant eaters, so they would never eat a human or anything like that. As far as attacking goes, if you get up into an animal's space, it's probably you're scaring them. Like I said, Aca's a tank. If you were getting too close to her and her baby in the wild, she might charge at you. But here at the zoo, you know, these guys don't really have any reason to charge their keepers here. Sometimes we used to have a camp counselor who was very, very, very tall, and sometimes he would intimidate some of the animals. So if he came up with his group of adventurers, which is one of our age groups here for summer camp, sometimes some of the males in the exhibits would start to pace around or snort at him, and he would have to back away because he intimidated them. But that's not a very common reaction from most of our animals here. In the wild, though, it can be very different. It's best to always give animals their space in the wild and to back away slowly from any situation with them.
Fantastic. All right, we've had more questions than we could possibly answer in a session, so I want to wrap up, Mary Ellen, with how people at home can learn more about what you guys are doing at the zoo, both now and in general, and maybe rhinos in general.
Yeah, for sure. So if you guys go at home, if you go to the Toronto Zoo website under parent resources, you're going to see a link to this video that we've posted right now, or we're filming right now, but also some at-home resources that go along with this video, as well as all the previous videos that we've posted with Explore by the Seat of Your Pants. As well as every day at 1 o'clock, the Toronto Zoo is doing a live keeper talk on our own personal Facebook. So you can check that out. Follow us on social media like Instagram, on Facebook. We even have TikTok, believe it or not. You can come follow us there, which is really exciting. And there's lots of different resources coming about as well. And if you want to learn more about rhinos, if you go to the Toronto Zoo website under the animals tab, you can learn a lot about our Indian rhinos and also our white rhinos that we have here as well.
Fantastic. Well, thanks, Mary Ellen. I put the Zoo to You link in the YouTube chat bar, so you can check that out. And if you're joining us with Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants, look for more of these videos on our YouTube page. You can subscribe to us and see all our sessions with the zoo over the last few weeks. Join us on social media, and if you like what we're doing with digital education, you can donate on our website as well. Thank you so much to our 250 people who stayed around for the whole session to learn about rhinos. Mary Ellen, this was fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. Hopefully we'll see you next week.
All right. Have a wonderful rest of your day, everyone. Bye for now, guys.